Hey, what's up, folks? It is Rosie here, and today I am reviewing the Fallout TV show. I absolutely love the show, and I highly recommend it to anyone looking for something to watch right now. It's truly everything I was hoping for going in. So now I'll provide some specific thoughts of mine on the show, and at the end I'll rate it out of 10. Let's start with the characters and performances. The best character by far was Cooper Howard, both as the Ghoul and in the flashbacks. Even though we don't know his whole story yet, we can still get a taste of how he went from being the kind and deservingly well-off man that he was into being the wasteland rogue that he is in the present. He started losing faith in humanity before the war had even started when he discovered what his own wife was up to with Vault-Tec, and I suppose the Wastelands did the rest of the work. Overall, this character is essentially this show's version of the Man in Black from Westworld, and Walton Goggins plays the role perfectly. The way he's so nonchalant as he's massacring loads of people is just perfect for the character. He's done with the world, so if he dies, whatever, but he might as well take his enemies down with him. Lucy and Maximus were both good as well. Ella Purnell does a really good job of selling Lucy's fish-out-of-water demeanor. All she wants is to do good, but she just doesn't get how things work in the wasteland, and it's pretty funny. And Aaron Moten plays the man who wants to be a hero pretty well too. I'm curious to see what happens with this character in Season 2. It seems like he's being set up as a new leader in the Brotherhood. One character that I was very entertained by that I don't see a lot of people talking about is Norman. Though I do think that was more due to his storyline being interesting than Moises Arias' performance, but that was a good performance. With this kind of character, you have what I'll call the Anakin Skywalker problem. Young men are often stoic and awkward, but on screen that can come across as bad delivery or strange dialogue. But I think Norman was executed pretty well. It helped a lot that they established his character's personality in the scene where they go over his work history and say that he lacks enthusiasm. That set the stage for him being this unmotivated young man who's struggling to find himself. It also helped that the other Vault Dwellers treated him like he was a bit quirky. Showing how all the characters interact with each other goes a long way in helping the audience understand each individual character. The smaller roles of the show were also pretty good. I especially loved the chicken-loving weirdo that had a few scenes. That was perfect for Fallout. The Vault Dwellers, the pre-war characters, the Wastelanders, all also very well executed. So in summary for the characters, they were all pretty good, but the only performance that I could see potentially winning an award is Walton Goggins' portrayal of Cooper Howard. Now let's get into the writing and cinematography. Without a doubt, this show's biggest strength is that it captures the tone and feel of Fallout perfectly. The sets, the Wastelanders, the creatures, all couldn't have been better. From start to finish watching this show, I felt like I was in the Fallout universe, which is very difficult for film adaptations of video games to achieve. That being said, I do think that open-world RPG is one of the easier genres to adapt into film because the way they're experienced isn't all that much different from a sci-fi or fantasy TV series. Regardless, this show is a perfect adaptation of the Fallout games. And if you saw my predictions video, then you know that I predicted that this would be a strong contender for Best Adaptation at the 2024 Game Awards. However, in light of what a perfect adaptation this is, I'm now going to elevate that prediction to I expect this show to win Best Adaptation this year. Next, we're going to talk about the writing in more detail. For the most part, I was very pleased with the writing. My favorite storyline was Norman's. You guys know that I love mysteries, so wondering what was going on in there kept my eyes glued to the screen. Overall, I felt that the directions the show went in were smart, and I was always entertained by what was being presented to me. I couldn't get enough, and that leads us to a bit of a problem. I do have some issues with the show, and I believe they share a cause, which is time constraints. The biggest one of these issues is that some of the big surprises in the finale were underdeveloped, and they needed more foreshadowing, if you will. For example, Lucy finding out the truth about her father. Moldaver tells Lucy, hey, part of why you came here is you wanted to know why it took him, right? And based on how that scene plays out, that seems to be true. But we never really see Lucy contemplating that throughout the show. I think they were trying to set this up with the Vault 4 storyline. It's meant to get Lucy to start asking questions about Vault-Tec and her father. But to drive that home, there needs to be something to connect the dots for the audience. Like, maybe a brief exchange between her and Maximus where he asks her, so what were the original inhabitants of your vault up to? Then she responds, I don't know, my father never talks about them. Then he says, maybe he doesn't know. Then we see a close-up of her looking as if she's contemplating something. That would send us the message that she's now considering that maybe there are things about her vault that she does not know and that maybe her father is not telling her everything that he knows. The other big thing that needed more development was the pre-war executives agreeing to cause the apocalypse. In light of how this scene is delivered, we're meant to believe that these people agreed to give up their lives as wealthy business people in a prosperous society just for the sake of building a new world the way they see fit. For that to be believable, there needed to be a brief monologue in here of, let's say, Bud saying, look, we know that the world is going to end. Even if no one drops nukes, eventually we will run out of resources. I mean, that's why we've ended up in this war in the first place, but the world ending doesn't mean that we have to end with it. We can use our vaults to outlive the apocalypse, and run experiments to plan how we're going to build a new world, a better world for our children and their children, and so on. That's how we're going to win the great game of capitalism, with time, and in that time we'll invest in the core thing that we need to build a better world, quality management. So yeah, there needed to be something like that in this scene to justify everyone getting on board with shooting first so fast like that, otherwise it's just not believable. In addition to some of the long-term arcs being underdeveloped, there were also some brief moments that fell short on details. For example, in the pilot, Moldaver makes Hank choose between Lucy and the captives, seemingly implying that she'll do something bad to whoever he doesn't choose, and she only takes Hank and lets them all go. So, what was the point of that choice? What was he choosing? My guess is that this exchange was originally meant to be longer, but a lot of it got cut for time, which ruined whatever they were trying to do with the choice, but they still needed there to be a reason for Hank to put Lucy in the closet, so the editor had to use the footage that they shot, which had Moldaver making Hank choose in it. And the end result was an exchange that didn't really make sense. So in summary, it seems like the writers wrote 10 episodes worth of content but had to cram that into 8 episodes, which resulted in some underdeveloped resolutions and a few details not making perfect sense. Another flaw with the writing and cinematography is the pilot did just an okay job of introducing the Fallout universe to people that haven't played the games. Like I said in my predictions, that was kind of key to getting the most out of this show, and they could have done a better job. While Jonathan Nolan is a great director, one of his flaws is that he sometimes relies a bit too much on the audience's powers of inference. So what do I mean by that? Well, to explain, I'll walk you through an example. The opening scene of the show attempts to give us an understanding of this setting with little conversations and the TV, which is written as part of the setting. But it would have been more effective to simply do a narrated introduction to the Fallout series like what Bethesda does for the games. My first Fallout was Fallout 4, and that opening cutscene along with the prologue gave me a very solid understanding of the setting. I was like, okay, so it's all very 50s inspired, it's mid-century modern but real, and the atmosphere is heavily influenced by the Cuban Missile Crisis, but this time the missiles get launched. But there's these things called vaults, yada yada yada, and we're left with this setting. Okay, I understand. And since Jonathan Nolan elected not to do something like that, the people I was watching with were confused throughout the whole pilot. Someone mistakenly thought it was the actual 50s because the futuristic elements weren't made clear. They also really struggled to grasp what was going on with Moldaver's group because they didn't understand that people do live outside of vaults, etc. In summary, they really should have just done a narrated introduction like what Bethesda does for the games. That's the best way to introduce newcomers to this universe. Moving on, I'll briefly mention all this hubbub about Fallout New Vegas. What's going on there is the timeline that Lucy finds in Vault 4 could be read to suggest that the bombing of Shady Sands took place before Fallout New Vegas, and that creates a big lore problem. But according to Bethesda, there's a plan in place for this, and New Vegas is not retcon, so rest easy, people. Though the showrunners must have known what they were getting into with this timeline. My guess is they're using the ambiguity of leaving the nuke without a date to generate curiosity and get us to ask questions. The last topic we're going to discuss here is how this show solved one of Fallout's biggest mysteries. We now know that Vault-Tec shot first. I'm very surprised that Todd Howard signed off on this. I never imagined that he'd let them dive into something so integral to Fallout lore, but he did, and the show's explanation is pretty good. Like I said earlier, it needed more development, but the idea itself is fine. A bit predictable for longtime Fallout fans, but it makes sense with what the games establish about Vault-Tec. Some might say that this seemingly goes against what Fallout creator Tim Kane's idea for the purpose of the vaults is. For those who don't know, his idea was that Vault-Tec was building a massive spaceship to use to look for a new planet to inhabit after Earth was destroyed, and that they were using the vaults to test technology for the journey, gather data they might need, and otherwise aid them in this purpose somehow. And if we look at the vaults from the games, we can see how each of their experiments would be useful for that. For instance, Vault 111 was testing cryogenics, and that can be used on the ship to freeze the passengers, making it so they don't have to worry about food and water or just waiting out the journey. I carded Tim Kane's video where he explains all this in detail in the top right. On the desktop, it should be like around here somewhere. So does the Fallout show go against the spaceship idea? Actually, not necessarily. With some tweaking, these two ideas could work very nicely together. The spaceship would just need to come after what we saw in the finale as a backup plan. It's possible that this is exactly what the writers have in mind. Maybe the spaceship is in Vegas and that's what they're setting up by showing Hank on his way there in the finale. I guess we'll find out in Season 2. And I do like what the show established. It's very poetic that Vault-Tec had planned to make a world of their choosing, but their fatal flaw was that they underestimated the world that they inadvertently created by shooting first. Also, knowing that they destroyed Shady Sands because the NCR had become a threat to their plan raises a big question. Did they cause the CPG massacre? I mean, if the NCR was a threat because it had become a functioning government, then who's to say they wouldn't consider other upstart governments a threat as well? I've covered the CPG massacre before, and at this point I'm sticking to the theory I presented in that video, but if more evidence surfaces that suggests Vault-Tec was behind it, then I may have to retcon that. Well, that's a wrap, folks. Those are my thoughts on Fallout Season 1. I've decided to rate it a 9 out of 10. It has some flaws, but those flaws did not significantly hinder my enjoyment of the show. The atmosphere was spot on. It felt like the Fallout universe from start to finish. The storylines were engaging and kept me interested the whole time. All the actors were pretty good, especially Walton Goggins. In a nutshell, this is the perfect adaptation of the Fallout universe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.